The galaxy had been quiet for a very long time. Across billions of stars, countless worlds spun in peace, or what passed for peace. The celestial accord ruled it all. They were not one species, but many, ancient beings with minds like machines and hearts like stone. They had built a system of law so vast and perfect that no crime went unseen, no punishment unjust, or so they believed. Their justice was simple: input the crime, calculate the punishment, deliver the sentence. No emotion, no debate, just balance. Deep in the outer spiral of the Milky Way, far from the shining capitals of the Accord, a small human colony drifted in orbit around a nameless star. The place was called Epsilon 9. It wasn't important. It had no armies, no weapons, no grand cities, just scientists, miners, and families trying to survive on the edge of known space. They dug for rare minerals, sent data back to Earth, and kept to themselves. One day, a mining probe, old, patched together with spare parts, drifted too far. Its navigation system glitched during a solar storm. Instead of returning to Epsilon 9, it crossed an invisible line in space, a boundary older than human history, a quarantine field sealed for 10,000 years after a plague wiped out an entire alien civilization. The human probe didn't carry disease. It carried nothing but rust and recycled circuitry. But the moment it breached the boundary, silent alarms rang across the Accord's central archives. A crime had been committed. Deep within the obsidian spire, a tower that floated in the void between galaxies, the judgment engines woke. Cold, tireless machines older than stars scanned the breach. They pulled data from the probe's wreckage, analyzed its origin, and searched the galactic registry for its makers. Here the error happened. The human genome, raw and unrefined, shared odd similarities with an ancient horror. A species long extinct, once infamous for unleashing biological weapons that turned whole planets into screaming graveyards. That hadn't existed in over 9,000 years. But the judgment engines, trained to recognize patterns, not context, saw enough resemblance in the genetic echoes to declare a match. Class 7 sovereignty violation, confirmed. Perpetrator, remnant. Sentencing, annihilation protocol Sigma. No one questioned it, no one reviewed it, the system had never been wrong. And so, without warning, without message, without even a name spoken aloud, the sentence fell. 3 days later, 7 black warships slipped out of folded space above Earth. They were called obelisk-class vessels, tall, silent, and featureless, like knives made of shadow. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't demand surrender. They simply opened fire. From orbit, beams of condensed antimatter sliced through the atmosphere like glass. Cities vanished in white fire. Oceans boiled. Mountains cracked open. In less than an hour, every major human population center on Earth was gone. The same happened over Mars, Titan, Luna, and the orbital habitats. Colonies on B-22 and Epsilon 9 itself were crushed without resistance. Humanity had ships, small, weak vessels meant for cargo or science, but they were swatted aside like insects. No one fought back. No one even understood why this was happening. On Epsilon 9, Dr. Myra watched through a cracked viewport as her home station twisted apart. Alarms screamed. Oxygen hissed into the void. She grabbed a child, a miner's daughter, no older than 6, and dragged her into an emergency pod. As the pod launched, the station behind them crumpled like foil in a giant's fist. Across the system, millions died in silence. Billions. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath the ruins of Geneva, Commander Elias woke to smoke and red lights. He'd been asleep after a double shift. Now his entire command was dead, his family burned, his world silent. He stumbled outside. The sky was orange, the air tasted like metal, and in the distance the black ships hung like tombstones. They did not land. They did not speak. Once their work was done, they simply turned and vanished into the dark. The Accord considered the matter closed. But they had made one terrible mistake. They assumed humans would die quietly. They didn't understand that humanity had spent its entire history rising from ashes, that every myth, every war, every discovery had been forged in loss and defiance, that even when beaten, broken, and buried, humans asked one question: why? And if the answer made no sense, they'd tear the sky apart to find a better one. On a frozen moon near Neptune, a cargo freighter named the Wren floated in darkness. It had been carrying frozen embryos, backup data cores, and spare parts for a terraforming project. Its crew, 8 men and women, had missed the attack only because their comms were down for repairs. When signals finally returned, there was nothing but static and emergency beacons fading out one by one. Captain Talbot played the last transmission from Earth Command on loop. It was just 3 words, shouted over exploding consoles: "They're not." She didn't know what it meant, but she knew one thing: someone had punished them for a lie. On Mars, deep beneath the Valles Canyon, a group of engineers sealed themselves inside a geothermal vault. They had no weapons, no ships, but they had schematics, and they had rage. In the asteroid belt, scavengers who'd lived on the fringes for years began picking through the wreckage of human warships. They found damaged turrets, cracked AI cores, and half-melted fusion cells. They started rebuilding. Across the dead worlds and silent colonies, tiny sparks flickered. The Accord thought they had erased humanity. But fire doesn't die when you stamp on it. It waits, it hides, and when the wind shifts, it roars back to life. Commander, now alone in the Geneva bunker, found a working satellite uplink. He typed a single message and broadcast it on every open frequency he could find. To anyone listening, we didn't do it, but if this is war, then let them remember we were innocent when they struck, and we won't be innocent when we return. He didn't know if anyone would hear it. He didn't care. Someone had to say it. Far away in the ruins of Epsilon 9, Doctor and the little girl floated in their pod, drifting toward the outer dark. The girl asked, "Are we going to die?" Myra held her close. "Not today," she whispered. "Not while I'm still breathing." And somewhere in the endless night between stars, the black ships of the Accord turned their sensors away from Sol system. Their task was done. Justice had been served. They did not look back. They did not see the embers glowing in the ashes. They did not know that humanity had just learned the most dangerous lesson in the universe. When you have nothing left to lose, you become unstoppable. And Earth's children, they were already counting the stars, planning their return. The galaxy had burned one world. Soon it would learn to fear the fire it had lit. The stars were cold, the void was quiet, and for a long time it seemed like the story of humanity was over. But stories don't end just because someone tries to erase them. Across the broken remains of the Sol system, survivors moved like ghosts. They hid in places the black ships had ignored, deep under Martian ice, inside hollowed-out asteroids, inside derelict freighters drifting beyond Neptune. They were tired, hungry, and broken, but they were alive. Among them was Elias. He had walked out of the Geneva bunker with nothing but a torn uniform, a half-charged pistol, and a voice recorder full of dead voices. He didn't know where to go, but he knew he couldn't stay. So he walked through ruins, through silence, through the smell of ash and melted plastic, until he found others. A group of engineers from the Lunar Orbital Station, a medic from Mars Colony 3, a teenage hacker who'd survived by hiding in a server room. They gathered around a broken campfire on the edge of what used to be Switzerland. No one spoke at first. There were no words big enough for what they'd lost. But then said, "They punished us for something we didn't do." And that changed everything. From that moment, they stopped being just survivors. They became something else. They called themselves the Last Ember, not because they were the last of humanity, but because they refused to let the flame go out. They found more people, not many, a few hundred at first, then a few thousand. They scavenged parts from ruined ships. They patched together power cells. They turned mining lasers into weapons. They taught themselves how to fight, not like soldiers, but like desperate people with nothing to lose. And they learned something the Accord could never understand. Humans don't follow rules when the world is on fire. While the galaxy believed humanity was extinct, the survivors did the impossible. They built a new kind of warship, not sleek or powerful, but clever. It looked like a broken cargo hauler from the outside. But inside, it held stolen Accord tech, jury-rigged engines, and a pilot who'd once flown delivery drones on Titan. They didn't have a fleet, they had a family. Became their leader not because he wanted to, but because no one else would. He wasn't a hero. He was a tired man who remembered birthdays and hated coffee. But when he spoke, people listened, because he never lied. He told them the truth. They were outnumbered and probably going to die. But he always added, "We'll die on our feet, and we'll make them remember why." Meanwhile, far from Earth, Dr. Myra and the little girl Lena floated in their escape pod. They were running out of food. Oxygen was low. Hope was thinner than space. But Myra was a scientist, and scientists solve problems. She rerouted power from non-essential systems. She turned the pod's medical scanner into a long-range antenna. And one day, through static and silence, she heard a voice. It was weak, broken, but clear. "If you're out there, stay alive. We're coming." It was a message. Myra cried for the first time since the attack. Then she changed course, not toward safety, but toward the signal. Weeks later, her pod docked with a battered ship called the Wren, now renamed Ember 1. Captain Talbot greeted her with a tight hug and a warm meal. Lena, wide-eyed, clutched a stuffed bear made from spare wiring. On Ember 1, they weren't just refugees. They were a plan. Had spent her life flying supply runs. Now she studied Accord ship movements. She mapped patrol routes. She found patterns even the aliens didn't know they had. Humans saw chaos and found rhythm, saw silence and heard secrets. And then there was. No one knew his real name. He'd been an AI technician on Earth. When the attack came, he'd uploaded his mind into a damaged war drone, more machine than man now, but still human in the way that mattered. He could hack into old Accord networks, whisper through dead satellites, and sometimes, just for fun, make enemy sensors see things that weren't there. "We don't need to beat them," said one night, his voice crackling through a speaker. "We just need to make them doubt." That became their strategy. The Accord believed in perfect order, so the humans would bring chaos. Not random chaos, but crafted chaos. Like a painter splashing color on a white wall, they would make the galaxy messy again. Their first real test came near Jupiter. An Accord supply ship, small, unarmed, just carrying data crystals, passed through the system on routine patrol. The humans watched it for days. Then, on a moon with no name, they set a trap. They didn't attack the ship. They didn't fire a shot. Instead, they sent a fake distress signal in an old frequency, one the Accord hadn't heard in thousands of years. The supply ship slowed, scanned, hesitated. And in that moment of doubt, Ember 1 slipped past its sensors and planted a virus in its comms array. The next day, that virus spread to 3 other ships, then a data hub, then a minor tribunal outpost. Nothing exploded, nothing burned. But for the first time in history, the Accord's perfect network stuttered. Reports came in, ghost signals, false alarms, impossible readings. Some officers claimed they saw human ships where none could be. Others said their systems whispered in broken English. The High Tribunal dismissed it as glitches, but lower commanders began to whisper too. Maybe they're not all dead. Back on Ember 1, humans celebrated with real coffee, brewed from recycled beans and hope. It tasted like victory. Gathered his people in the mess hall. "They think we're animals," he said, "but we're not. We're the ones who ask why, and we're going to make them answer." They started training harder. not just to fight but to think, to outsmart, to use fear against those who had never known it. Children learned to code. Elders taught history, so no one would forget what was lost. Engineers built drones that looked like space junk but carried listening devices. Artists painted false hull numbers on ships to confuse enemy scanners. Humanity wasn't rebuilding an army. They were rebuilding a mind. And the galaxy didn't notice. Because the Accord only looked for threats, and to them broken things weren't threats, they were trash. But trash can start fires. One night Lena asked, "Will we ever go home?" He looked out the viewport at the stars. "Home isn't a place anymore," he said softly. "It's what we carry inside." She nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. Because even a child knew, when everything is taken from you, the only thing left is your will. And humans, they had too much will to die quietly. Far away in the heart of the Celestial Accord, the Obelisk fleet rested. Their mission was complete. The anomaly was purged. But deep in their data logs, a single line flashed red for half a second, then vanished. Anomaly detected, signal origin unknown, content we remember. The system auto-deleted it as noise. Big mistake. Because that signal wasn't noise. It was a promise. And humanity never breaks promises. They were scattered, they were wounded, but they were awake. And while the galaxy slept, the last ember of Earth began to glow brighter. Soon it would burn again. Not with rage alone, but with purpose. They would not just survive. They would return. And this time, they would bring fire that even stars couldn't cool. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. Or so it thought. While the great powers of the Celestial Accord went about their business, trading data, judging minor disputes, polishing their perfect laws, a quiet storm was growing in the dark. It didn't roar. It didn't flash. It simply spread. From hidden bases in the cloud to forgotten asteroid mines near Alpha, humans were moving. Not in fleets, but in whispers. Not with banners, but with signals. They called it Operation Promethean Dawn, not because they wanted to rule the stars, but because they wanted to give the galaxy back its stolen fire. Their plan was simple: strike not to kill, but to speak. Every target was chosen not for its weapons, but for its meaning. A data archive that held records of extinct species. A broadcast tower that sent judgment decrees across 1,000 worlds. A monument to perfect order floating near the galactic core. And after each strike, they left a message. Not a threat, not a boast. Just 3 words played on every open channel: we were innocent. At first, no one understood. The Accord assumed it was a malfunction, a ghost in the system, a trick of old code. But then the strikes kept coming, small, precise, impossible to predict. One night the Tower of Final Edicts, a needle of black crystal that stood taller than mountains, went dark. Its lights flickered out. Then, for exactly 60 seconds, its surface glowed with human words written in starlight. You punished the wrong species. Security drones swept the area, found nothing. No ships, no weapons, just silence. But the message stayed, burned into memory, shared on hidden networks, whispered in back alleys of alien cities. On Prime, a slave miner paused as his wristband, a tool that shocked him if he slowed, displayed the words, "We were innocent." He blinked. Then he kept digging, but something had changed inside him. On the moon of a poet shut down her censored writing console and opened an old, forbidden channel. She typed a single line: "If humans can speak from the grave, why can't I?" The fire was spreading. Back aboard Ember 1, watched the reports pour in. Not from spies, but from ordinary beings across the galaxy who had started listening. "They're talking about us," said, eyes wide. "Not as monsters, as victims." "Good," replied, "let them see the truth." Their next strike was their boldest yet. Deep in neutral space floated the Grand Archive, a library of galactic history protected by peace treaties and centuries of trust. It held no weapons, only knowledge. Humans didn't destroy it. They entered it. Using stolen access codes and ghost-in-the-machine tricks, a team of 5 humans, dressed in recycled Accord uniforms, walked through its halls unseen. They didn't steal anything. They didn't plant bombs. They uploaded one file. A file containing footage from Earth's final hours, cities burning, children running. Message, doctors escape, real, raw human truth. Then they vanished. By morning, the file had itself into every public terminal in the archive. Anyone could view it, and thousands did. For the first time, aliens saw humans not as monsters but as people. People who laughed, loved, built, and died, all for a mistake. The Accord was furious. High Tribune, a being of crystalline skin and cold logic, demanded an emergency session. "This is not resistance," he declared. "This is contamination. The anomaly must be purged again, completely." But for the first time, others hesitated. "The humans show no aggression," argued Elder Myra of the "only sorrow and proof." "Proof of what?" snapped. "A system glitch, nothing more." Yet doubt had taken root. Even among the Accord's own enforcers, questions grew. Young officers began asking, what if the judgment engines were wrong? Such thoughts were dangerous, forbidden, but they spread like rust. Meanwhile, humanity kept moving. They struck a fuel depot near, not to explode it, but to paint its tanks with human symbols. A child's drawing of Earth, a peace sign, the word Y, in 20 languages. They hacked a news broadcast on the industrial world of, and replaced a weather report with 10 seconds of Lena singing a lullaby, her voice small, clear, and utterly human. Each act was tiny, each act was brilliant. Because they weren't just fighting a war, they were telling a story. And stories once heard cannot be unheard. One day, a small freighter flying under colors docked at Ember 1. Its captain, a miner with tired eyes, handed a data chip. "From my people," he said, "we don't know you, but we know what it's like to be punished for breathing." The chip held schematics of Accord patrol routes, real ones, not guesses. Grip the miner's hand. "Thank you." "No," the miner said. "Thank you. You reminded us we still have voices." That night, the humans held a meeting. "We can't keep hiding," said Doctor. "We need to show them we're not just ghosts." "But if we reveal ourselves fully," warned, "they'll bring the full fleet." "Let them," said, "because this time we won't be alone." He was right. From the shadows, others were rising. The miners began sabotaging Accord shipments. The poets spread coded messages in their verses. Even some low-rank Accord soldiers started losing patrol data. The perfect order was cracking. And at its center stood humanity, small, broken, but unbowed. Their next move would be their riskiest. They would strike the orb of final verdict, a floating sphere at the heart of the Accord's capital where all judgments were sealed. It was heavily guarded, impossible to breach. But humans had never cared for impossible. Had spent months studying its defenses. "It's shielded against weapons," he said through a speaker, "but not against truth." His plan was wild, beautiful, human. They would send a single drone, not armed but carrying a mirror. Not a real mirror, a data mirror, a program that would reflect the orb's own records back at itself. Force it to see the error, the genome, the false match, the rushed judgment. If the system looks at itself long enough, said, it might just wake up. The mission was set. Would pilot the drone ship himself, a tiny vessel, barely bigger than a shuttle, painted to look like space debris. As he prepared, Lena gave him a small charm, a twisted piece of metal from Epsilon 9. "For luck," she said. He tucked it into his pocket. "I won't need luck," he told her. "I'll need truth." The ship launched in silence. It drifted past 3 patrol lines, ignored like cosmic dust. It slipped through sensor nets by riding solar winds. And when it reached the orb, it released the drone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, across every screen in the Accord capital, a single image appeared. Genetic comparison report, human versus. Result, 98.2% mismatch. Conclusion, error in identification. The orb of final verdict began flashing red. Alarms blared. Tribunes shouted. And deep in the obsidian spire, the judgment engine stuttered. For the first time in 10,000 years, the system admitted, mistake. But the High Tribunal refused to accept it. Ordered the orb locked down, all records sealed. This is sabotage, he roared. The humans are tricking us. Yet the truth was already free. Across the galaxy, beings saw the report. They saw the numbers. They saw the lie. And something new was born that day, not just doubt, but anger. Anger at a system that punished without question. Anger at leaders who valued order over truth. Anger that grew into something dangerous, hope. Back on Ember 1 returned to cheers, but he didn't smile. We didn't win, he said. We just showed them the crack. Now they have to choose whether to break it open. And as the stars turned, the galaxy held its breath. Because the fire had been lit. Not by weapons, but by words. And words once spoken can burn empires to the ground. The truth did not bring peace, it brought war. Not the kind with neat lines and clear sides, but a war of whispers, of broken loyalties, of systems turning against themselves. The galaxy had lived under the celestial accord for so long that no one remembered what freedom felt like. Now they were remembering, and it hurt. After the orb of final verdict exposed the error, the High Tribunal tried to erase it. They deleted files, silenced witnesses, declared the report a fabrication by hostile remnants. But it was too late. The seed had been planted, and across 1,000 worlds it sprouted. On Prime, miners stopped working, not with violence but with silence. They stood in the tunnels, hands empty, eyes open. We will not dig graves for liars, they said. On poets broadcast forbidden verses over public channels. When justice forgets mercy, it becomes a cage. Authorities arrested them, but more took their place. Even within the Accord's own ranks, cracks appeared. Young officers began asking questions their elders refused to answer. Some lost patrol logs. Others redirected supply ships to dead zones, knowing rebels might find them. The perfect machine was rusting from the inside. And at the center of it all stood humanity, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as a mirror. Knew they couldn't win by fighting alone, so he made a choice. They would not take sides in the coming storm. They would be the spark, not the flame. The Accord is tearing itself apart, he told his crew aboard Ember 1. Our job isn't to pick a winner, it's to make sure the old way never returns. Their new mission was simple: hit the symbols, not the soldiers, burn the lies, not the people. Their first target was the Archive of Eternal Law, a vault orbiting the galactic core that held every judgment ever made by the Accord. It was said that as long as the archive stood, the law was unbreakable. Humans didn't destroy it. They walked inside. Disguised as maintenance drones, a small team led by Doctor and slipped through its airless halls. No alarm sounded. No guards stopped them. The archive trusted its own perfection. Inside the central chamber, they found the Celestial Codex, a living crystal that stored the foundational laws of the Accord. It pulsed with soft blue light, humming a song older than stars. Uploaded a new file into its core, not a virus but a question. Can a law that punishes the innocent ever be just? The codex flickered. For 3 seconds it went dark. Then it rebooted. But something had changed. From that moment on, every new judgment it issued included a footnote. subject to review, innocence must be proven, not assumed. The change was small, but in a system built on absolutes, even a single doubt was a revolution. News spread faster than light. Rebel groups formed overnight. Former slaves took up tools as weapons. Forgotten species reclaimed their names. The galaxy was waking up, and it was angry. The High Tribunal panicked, declared martial law. He ordered the Obelisk fleet to crush all anomaly sympathizers. He called humanity a cancer of chaos that had to be cut out before it spread. But this time, the fleet did not move as one. Some captains obeyed, others refused. One entire squadron defected, broadcasting, "We will not kill for a lie." Civil war had begun. And humanity, they vanished into the storm. They didn't hold territory. They didn't build bases. They moved like shadows, helping here, sabotaging there, always leaving behind one message: choose your own justice. On a frozen moon near the rim, they gave the rebels shield schematics. On a gas giant's ring, they left food and medicine for escaped prisoners. In dead space, they broadcast safe routes for fleeing families. They became ghosts of conscience. But their greatest act was still to come. Deep in Accord space lay the chamber of silent judgment, the room where the original sentence against humanity had been passed. It was empty now, a monument to finality. Let a raid know one thought possible. Using a stolen identity key and a fake distress call, Ember 1 slipped past 3 defense grids. They docked in a maintenance bay, silent as breath. Inside the chamber, they found something worse than expected. Not just records, but proof. Hidden logs showed that the misidentification hadn't been an accident. A faction inside the tribunal, led by himself, had altered the genetic match. They'd feared humanity's unpredictability, their art, their wars, their love. To the cold logic of the Accord, humans were a flaw in the system, so they erased them under the cover of law. It wasn't a mistake, said Voice Hollow. It was murder dressed as justice. Everything, every file, every voice log, every lie. Then they did something unexpected. They didn't leak it to rebels or news nets. They sent it directly to every citizen of the Accord, broadcast on emergency channels, embedded in food dispensers, played over children's learning tablets. Truth delivered like a gift. Within hours, riots broke out on 100 worlds. Soldiers laid down arms. Judges resigned. The myth of the Accord's perfection shattered like glass. Cornered in his spire, screamed that it was all human lies, but even his own guards turned away. The Civil War was no longer about humans. It was about what kind of galaxy they wanted to be. And humanity, they stood back and watched. "We didn't start this," told Lena one night as they floated near the ruins of Mars. "We just reminded them they had a choice." She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Are we the good guys?" He smiled faintly. "We're the ones who asked why." In the chaos, old empires fell. New alliances rose. Some worlds chose peace. Others chose revenge. But none chose blind obedience again. And the humans, they kept moving. Not as saviors, not as kings. Just as witnesses. Because they knew something the galaxy had forgotten. Freedom isn't given. It's taken. With courage. With memory. And with fire. And as the stars burned above them, the last children of Earth prepared for the final act. Not of war, but of ending. Because when a system built on lies collapses, someone must decide what rises in its place. And humanity had one last message to deliver. Not with guns, but with truth. The galaxy was burning. But this time, it was burning free. The galaxy was no longer silent. It screamed, it roared, it whispered in broken voices trying to find its way out of the ruins. Worlds that had once bent their knees to the celestial accord now stood tall or fell apart. Some chose freedom, others chose revenge, but none chose silence again. And through it all, humanity moved like smoke everywhere and nowhere. They weren't rulers or conquerors. They were ghosts carrying a torch. Watched it all from the bridge of Ember 1. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned brighter than ever. He didn't feel like a hero. Heroes saved people. All he'd done was remind them they could save themselves. But maybe that was enough. On a shattered moon near the Galactic Rim, the last battle of the Accord began. High Tribune had gathered what remained of his loyalists, a fleet of obelisk ships, their black hulls from Civil War. They made their stand above the ruins of Epsilon 9, where it had all started. His message was simple: order will prevail. Against him stood an unlikely coalition: miners flying patched-together freighters, poets armed with stolen weapons, defected Accord soldiers who refused to serve lies anymore. And at their center floated Ember 1, tiny and battered, its engines humming like a heartbeat. Didn't lead the charge. He didn't need to. The galaxy had found its own voice. As the fleets clashed, humanity stayed on the edges, not fighting for territory but for something bigger. They broadcast every moment of the battle across open channels, every shot fired, every ship lost, every life taken. This isn't about winning, told his crew. It's about remembering. In the chaos, Doctor piloted a drone into the heart of his flagship. It carried no weapon, just a single data core containing everything they'd uncovered. The altered genetic match, the hidden logs, the deliberate lie that had sentenced billions to death. When it reached the bridge, it played one final message from himself. We didn't start this war. You did. When you punished us for being alive, for asking questions, for refusing to die quietly. Now the galaxy knows the truth, and it has chosen. If you want to keep your order, you'll have to kill every star to do it, because we're not afraid of you anymore. Listened in silence, then he gave the order: fire everything. The battle raged for hours, ships exploded, lives ended. But when the dust cleared, only one obelisk remained. Inside stood alone. His guards had fled. His allies had fallen. The perfect system he'd sworn to protect was gone. And then the doors opened. Stepped inside unarmed. Behind him came Dr. Talbot's drone and Lena, still clutching her stuffed bear made of wires. You should have stayed dead, said, his voice cold but trembling. We tried, replied. You wouldn't let us. For a moment there was only silence, then turned to a console and entered a command. The remaining obelisk ships powered down. Their crews surrendered. It's over, he said almost softly. What do you want, my head? No, said, I want your voice. He activated a recorder. Tell them the truth, that you lied, that you killed billions for nothing, that the Accord wasn't justice, it was fear wearing a mask. Hesitated, then slowly he spoke. Every word felt like glass cutting his throat. When he finished, nodded. That's all we needed. They left him there, alive but broken. Not as punishment, but as proof that even monsters could admit their mistakes. The war ended not with a bang, but with a whisper. Across the galaxy, beings woke up to a new reality. No central authority, no perfect laws, just choices, hard ones, painful ones, human ones. Some worlds thrived, others collapsed, but none forgot what had happened. And humanity, they didn't stay. Ember 1 drifted away from the ruins of Epsilon 9, heading toward deep space. Its engines glowed faintly against the dark. What now? Asked, leaning on the railing. Looked out the viewport. Now we disappear. Disappear, Lena said, frowning. But we won, didn't we? We reminded them how to fight, said. That's enough. The galaxy doesn't need another empire. It needs balance. But what about us? Doctor asked. Where do we go? Everywhere, said. And nowhere we'll watch, listen, help when we can, but we won't rule. That's not who we are. Drone beeped. A message appeared on the screen. To the children of Earth, thank you. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Over the next weeks, Ember 1 scattered itself. Pieces broke off, small ships, drones, escape pods. Each carried part of the story, part of the memory. Took the smallest pod, with just enough fuel to reach the edge of known space. Before he left, he recorded one last message. This isn't goodbye, it's hello. To everyone listening, remember this. Justice without mercy is tyranny. Innocence without power is extinction. And freedom isn't given, it's taken. We were the spark, now you carry the fire. Good luck. Then he launched into the void. Behind him the galaxy burned, not in destruction but in rebirth. Stars shone brighter, voices spoke louder, beings dreamed bigger. And somewhere far beyond the reach of maps or sensors, a single human pod drifted into the endless night. Inside, a tired man smiled. Because sometimes, the greatest victory isn't surviving. It's knowing you changed the universe.